Well, everybody, so I've got an interesting video, I think. It's not a brand new concept. I've done something like this before, but I'm doing it a little bit different this time. So, hydrographics. You may or may not be familiar with the term. Hydrographics is different than hydro dipping. Hydrographics is when well, you're going to see what it is, so I'm going to save it for now. I have done hydrographics on this channel before. I have, and I will get some of them out. I've actually not quite finished these. I have used the process of hydrographics to do the camouflage on some of my Warhammer vehicles. And as you can see, it lets you do some rather complicated patterns. I've got another one. I did a Baneblade with it. So you can see this camouflage that was applied, kind of an urban deal, to these vehicles. The top of this one's pretty good. The cracking here, like this is part of the film. This is what it looks like. This is part of the pattern. So, and then, you know, obviously I did some other work to it. But hydrographics allows you to apply some rather complex patterns, designs. I mean, you can have everything from a camouflage pattern all the way to, you know, sports team logos, all sorts of stuff, all sorts of things. And wrap it around a 3D shape. It is not great around very jagged shapes, but what it should be very good at is the nice, smooth, aerodynamic shape of an aircraft. Now, I happen to have in the stash in the garage, this is a pretty old Su-27. I mean, this would represent, and if you take a look at the picture there, it's got the counterweights on the vertical. This would be a very old Su-27, probably Su-27S or P, probably an S. I don't know, maybe P. Anyway, the point is, this is an old kit from Airfix, and the reason I'm using this kit is because, you know, it's an old kit. It's nothing compared to the new modern kits in terms of accuracy. But so, like, if things go wrong, I don't mind losing this particular kit. I didn't even know I had it till I went looking. When I went looking for something that I wanted to, you know, build this flanker out of. As you can see, this kit represents, if you look at the marking guides, flankers with the PVO. PVO is, you know, back in the day, there was a separate branch of the Soviet Air Force that was specifically for air defense, and that's what the PVO is. So that's what these represent. Anyway, that's a little irrelevant to this project. Hydrographics is a great, like I said, great way to apply patterns, and they come in very specific, you know, name brand camouflage patterns like Mossy Oak, like Cryptek, things like that. They also have some non-name brand stuff that you probably haven't heard of, and just some you can get specific camouflage patterns, like you can get multicam, you can get U.S. military woodland, you can get desert, you can get tiger stripe, stuff like that. The one thing that you got to look out for when we're talking about applying a hydrographics type pattern, and yes, I am starting to cut pieces out, and I'll tell you why in a minute, is that you know, some patterns are relatively large, and to put them on a small project like this, you wouldn't actually be able to see the whole pattern because there wouldn't be enough surface area. And there are actually some, like for example, some patterns that hunters like to use on, say, a large hunting rifle stock. You would need that large surface area to see the whole pattern. If we put it on here, it would just look like a disjointed collection of random shapes because you wouldn't see the whole pattern play out. Cryptek is great because they supply the patterns in full size and what we call reduced. So while the full size pattern probably would not work very well, we can use the reduced size, which basically it's like if you took a picture and put it on a copy machine and reduced it. I think that would work pretty well. And Cryptek has some really cool looking patterns. The thing is, you have to be very specific with the base coat that you use. And I'm going to explain more about hydrographics as we go. So what I'd like to do is I just kind of, this is a let's see what happens. I would like to see what happens if we were to try to apply a Cryptek reduced camouflage to this aircraft. What would it look like? How would it come out? What are some techniques that would work? Or are we going to identify some techniques that wouldn't work? You know, I just want to see. And that's why I'm using this, because the Su-27 is a very aerodynamic design. It's got a lot of nice flat surfaces that work great for hydrographics application. We don't have a lot of what we call void areas. And where can I illustrate a void area on something I have? All these 90-degree areas, these are all what we'd call void areas. Areas where air bubbles might get trapped as we dip this through the water. Areas where the pattern might not be able to wrap around. This would be a terrible choice for a hydrographics film. We could make it work. We'd have to dip it multiple parts, multiple times in a certain way. We could definitely make it work, but it'd be very labor intensive to do that. I'm going to put a link to the video where I dipped the tanks. I'll put it up here in the corner where you can see that process. But I think that doing an aircraft would have great results. Because like I said, nice smooth surface area for the pattern to really wrap around and look good on. But we'd have to really look at how we're doing it to avoid mistakes and gaps and all sorts of stuff. So what I'm going to do right now, sorry I've been babbling for a while, but I just want to set the stage. I'm going to take a look at the parts. I'm not really looking to assemble the model right now. I'm looking to figure out what we have to do, how we have to set this up to get a good dip, to make sure that we can get the coverage we want and still have the model set up to build well later. So I've already decided that I'm only going to put this camouflage pattern on the upper surfaces, kind of like what you'd see in a flanker. The bottom we'll paint regular style with like a light blue color. That'll be fine. So we will need to cut out the bottom of the fuselage, because we're going to have to kind of put the top and the bottom together to figure out where that midline will be between the two colors, the base coat for the camouflage and the sky blue, the light blue, the gray, whatever we choose to go, because this is obviously going to be a what-if project because of the way we're doing it. I might give it realistic Soviet markings or Russian markings or Ukrainian markings, since that's the thing of the day. Or maybe even some other country. Maybe we'll pick a country that doesn't even fly flankers at all and give them the flanker of their dreams. Who knows? We are definitely going to need to look at how our horizontal stabilizers will get color. And we're absolutely going to need to look at how our wings get color. And notice I'm leaving sprue attached, because that is actually going to help us out with the dipping process. And anything that's going to be purely the bottom color, I'm just going to leave. Not even going to worry about right now. Radome. This is a pretty badly shaped radome, by the way, I think, if I remember correctly. Don't need to do that. Engine burner cones don't need to do that. Intakes are all on the bottom. They can stay. I seem to have extra set of sprues for wings, and weird. So when I mentioned base coating, the Hydrographics film, the way it works, let me take a step back. So we have a film that looks like it's on plastic. What it's actually called is polyvinyl alcohol film. It is a form, it's kind of a plastic. We lay it on a calm surface of water, and you guys will observe this as I do it. You'll get to see it. It sits on the water, the film hydrates, it absorbs a little bit of water. We spray a specific chemical activator on it, which dissolves most of, not all of, but about 99% of that PVA film. So what you end up having then is that perfect pattern, whatever it happens to be, colors, pictures, text, camouflage pattern, now floating in the exact pattern on the surface of that calm water. We'll take whatever the object is and we will dip it specifically in different ways. You can't just go bloop, because if you do that, you have air trapped, you have void spaces, we call that where the ink doesn't stick. So it takes a good amount of technique. We will dip the piece through there, and the ink that is now floating on the surface of the water will adhere and wrap around all the different parts of the piece you're dipping. That's cool. We will then rinse off all the remaining PVA that's actually under the ink on the surface of the water. And then we will let it all dry, and then you will have to give it a protective coat. Now, in modeling, we always give it a protective coat anyway. So the ink is alcohol soluble, to give you an idea. So we can do some kind of weathering. We can decal over it. It's waterproof. So we can work like that. But I'll probably give it, as soon as I get it home, I'll give it its first clear coat just so we can start working on it. In order to get it to stick, though, that ink won't stick directly to this plastic. It will adhere to it, but it won't grab onto it. It'll be very easy to smudge off and everything. So we apply base coats. Now, there are specific brands of base coating that we use that are made just for the hydrographics industry. I have discovered that a lot of the time, though, and like I figured out with these guys right here, acrylic paint will work. Enamel paint will work. The first thing I know we're going to do is the verticals we're going to dip separately, because if we were to try to dip them while they're on here, it's going to make it difficult. We're going to have huge void areas in this angle over here. We're not going to get coverage there. We're going to have to do, it's going to be awkward to try to get both sides covered. We're going to have issues here. We're going to get a much better dip if we were able to do the upper surface on its own. We'll do one side of the vert, then the other side of the vert. We'll let them dry, and then we will attach them later on. And we'll get much better coverage and a much better look that way. So this one is already separated. I'm going to separate this one too, and then what I'll probably do is just PVA glue or hot glue this to a sprue in the middle so that I have a handle for dipping, because obviously I can't hold on to this if I'm going to be dipping it all. I need something else. What I'm kind of concerned about, what I'm thinking about is the wings. So do I want to dip these pieces separately? Like, I can do these together. This is a great handle right here if I find the right angle to dip, and I'll have the pattern here and here, but I won't have a continuous pattern that goes from one wingtip across the fuselage to the other wingtip. So the question is, do I try to assemble the wings to the fuselage here and dip it as one thing? And if I do that, how will that affect the actual dip? Because remember, we got to put this whole thing in the water. We don't want to disturb that ink on the surface any more than we have to. This piece right here, perfect as it is. I'll just glue a longer piece of sprue onto here so I have a little wider, a little longer handle on it. So in effect, you know, I can make sure I'm dipping it in and my hand is not disturbing the surface of the water, and then turn it over for the next step, and we're good to go. This is perfect right here. I don't need to mess with this. I just want to make sure that I'm trimming up any excess around the edges, and we're ready to base coat this as is. And I'm talking this out as much to explain on the video as it is to help me kind of figure out what I'm doing. I'm going to have to separate these wings. There are plenty of ways for me to, like, if I want to just end up attaching them through a sprue again later on, it really might make sense to me, for the purposes of what we're doing, to attach these to the fuselage now, which means I got to be really careful making sure I get equal angles with equal droop on, you know, by the launch rails and everything. Because here's another thing to keep in mind. Once this comes home from the shop with me tomorrow and we're back here on the workbench, we can mask off and we can paint all of the undersurface color. We really can't do touch-ups on the top surface color if we screw up, because it's not just one color. We've applied a whole camouflage pattern. We might be able to get colors that closely represent what those are, but we're not going to be able to just, like, you know, say, oh, I'm just going to brush that up over there. With a little bit of work, just a little bit of work, I've got wings mounted, and they're, you know, I'm just mounting them to the fuselage here, the upper fuselage. They're even. I'm not sure when we mount the lower exactly how they're going to sit, because there's some warpage here I'm going to have to work out. I have time to worry about that later on. Forgot about the air brake, but what I'm going to do is just mount the air brake right in there, so that, like everything else, it dips nice and evenly throughout there. and that'll be nice. I just got to find a, you know, I don't know, fold a piece of masking tape over or a little hot glue dot or something just to mount that in there. For the primer coat, I was going back and forth between using like a micro filler, like Mr. Surfacer. I think I did a pretty good job of buffing this up with a 2000 grit. So I'm gonna go straight for the Alclad Gloss Black Base. I have so much trouble saying that. Because then we'll have our metallic areas just prepped perfectly for when we do them later, and I can just mask them off completely before we spray the actual base color, and that will kind of make it nice. Because if we do the base color and then we try to paint this over, it won't be a nice, like perfectly smooth metallic looking finish. So this is actually going to work out better for us now. Well, we have our upper fuselage, nice and glossy black. I have masked off the parts that are going to remain black and glossy so that we can metallic them later. Except for this cockpit area is just going to stay black, so I figured, why not? I'll just mask it off. Now, I went to the shop today for work, and I got myself, I had nothing that actually matches the correct base color for the Hydrographics that we're going to do. I thought about mixing. I was gonna try to recreate this with little mission models with some sack bomber tan and white, and I probably could have, with some trial and error, recreated this. But you know what? Why not? You have access to the real thing. Why not just get the real thing? So I brought some home in a jar, and I also, just to demonstrate what I was talking about earlier with the film. This is Hydrographics film. And so this is the actual pattern we're going to use right here. This is reduced. Now, remember I talked about there's full size. This is the full size. And then there's reduced. And you can see the difference. I'm going to use just a piece of white plastic. Just recognize that this is not the correct base color for this pattern. So it's not going to look the way it's going to when it's done. So it's going to be, this is much lighter than it's going to look. But you see how the full size has much bigger areas. And the reduced lets us get a lot of that camouflage pattern in a smaller area. So this is why I was talking about we're going to use on this little 1/72nd scale model, we're going to use the reduced as opposed to the regular size. Now, if you know, this isn't going to show up very well. Well, I guess it might. I don't know. I guess we could have used the full size pattern on here, but it, you know, you would have just had large areas of color and some with not so much color. I think that using the reduced is gonna, I mean, if you want a disruptive camouflage look on this size, this is really gonna do pretty well. And looking at this now in my hand, which I didn't have it when we were making the original decisions of what was gonna go on, I'm really glad I attached the wings, because you can see that this pattern would have abruptly stopped and started over anew on each side had we done that. So these are just I cut off some 6x6 inch squares so that we could take a look at them and we could see really what they look like. And I like the Highlander. This is called Cryptek Highlander Reduced. And I like that it's got, so the clear areas are where this base color is going to show right through. So anything that looks white. And then we've got tans into some greens and some browns and some blacks. And the colors really do change when you put the appropriate base color behind it. So that's going to look, I think it's going to, you know, of course this is going to be a what if, and I'm thinking a ground attack, got something on there, a ground attack kind of aircraft loaded up. So this, you know, this color would look pretty cool. Now you can see this is very thinned. This is made for shooting through a spray gun. So we should have no problems airbrushing it directly on. And what I'm going to do is, because obviously, you know, panel lines and stuff. Now, when this goes on, let me back up. When this goes on, it settles directly like in ink right on here. So we would be able to probably do some panel lines and everything. You know, in the recesses anyway. Remember, this film is going to disappear. It's not going to exist when we dip this. But it's going to be hard to do a lot of weathering and everything, because remember, we're not going to be able to touch this up, really. I mean, we could. It's going to be a whole lot of work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to airbrush this inside the panel lines. So I'm basically, you know, there's no pre-shading or anything like that. I could theoretically airbrush this on and then do some pre-shading, but what I'm going to do, since I've got a nice black base for the primer, I'm going to airbrush in, and I'm going to leave a little bit of panel lining on there and everything, and that will actually show through, because remember, we're going to be able to see that darker color through a lot of the camouflage colors and everything. And I think it's going to work out well. I think it's going to work out well. If it didn't make sense when I said it, just follow me on this. We're going to get going here in a minute, and in several hours, I'm going to be actually taking this to the shop. So this will have time to dry, cure, do what it needs to do, and we're going to take this right in and dip it. And you know, hopefully this works out as well as I'm hoping. We'll see. Let's get to the airbrushing. Water, it's, you know, a little grimy because tank is used, it gets changed once in a while. Timer is counting as the film hydrates here. And I'm going to start with the verticals. And just dip right through there. I have the other side taped because you don't want to get any water or any of the PVA on the opposite side there, because then when you try to dip it, it won't stick. So that'll be my first one. We got about 20 seconds until we can spray the activator on here. How it just starts getting really glossy once. Looks like we've got pretty good coverage and maybe some bubbles in it. We'll have to touch up air bubbles, means ink won't stick. But now I'm going to dry this off and tape off the other side. After the dip, we have to rinse to get all the excess PVA and stuff off. And so here we have some pretty good pieces. You never know, like you see videos of people dipping on YouTube, but they never show you the final result. This is the final result, it's good. And now we have clean sides on the back. This is still taped, but because we taped, so now I can tape this side and dip the other sides of the verts. Here is our first view outside of the shop, outside of the dip tank and the rinse tank. And if you take a look, you can see how those inks really, they settle perfectly. You can see all the recessed panel line detail across the whole thing perfectly. But we have our I mean, it was a great dip. We have all of our camouflage on there. And, you know, yeah, you could paint something like that with masks, but how long would that take to paint? Just saying. So then we've got the verticals, which also came out very nice. And then we've got the stabilators, which still have the black undersides because they're going to be, well, they're going to be painted the underside color. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give a clear coat to protect this and keep all this color in there. And then we'll take off the masking, and then, you know, we can do the metallic areas on here like any standard flanker. And by the way, you can see that the camouflage wrapped all the way around the sides. So we're gonna have to be real careful when we assemble this, because like I said, if we mess up the paint around the edges, we're not going to be able to just touch it up easily with a regular paint. But yeah, so I'm gonna get a nice acrylic clear coat. I'm probably gonna use aqua gloss because that is one of my favorite things, and it's a nice thin coat. You know, it's, where is my aqua gloss right now? Okay, just again to, you know, this is soluble by a lot of stuff. We'll get a nice acrylic clear coat on there, lock in all the work we've done, and then I can go to working on the next steps and everything. But basically, we've got our top side camouflage on there, and you know, how good is it for an aircraft camouflage? I don't know, but it looks cool, and that's what I'm going for on this one. There is much work to do on this model. We are only basically done with the very first step. So in the coming parts, and I'm not sure how many parts there will be, in the coming parts we'll start the actual construction of this airplane. And it is a rather old kit, so I anticipate there's going to be a lot of work to do, sanding, filling, stuff like that. But you know, at least we know what direction we're going in. We've got the dielectric panels to mask off and paint on here, as well as all of the underside color, the metallics for the top and the bottom, and all that fun stuff. So it should be a good project when it's all finished. I'm pretty excited. I hope you guys are excited to see how it comes out too. I still have no idea how we're going to mark this thing yet. It is very Ace Combat, now that I think about it too. But you know what? It should be a pretty cool, one-of-a-kind sort of thing when it's all done. And the important thing is the proof of concept so far is a go. It's cool that it worked, and there are just so many other patterns I'd like to try on different aircraft now that I know this works. But we don't know it totally works yet, because we still have to assemble everything and do all the other painting and hope that this finish survives. So join me on the upcoming part or parts where we see this old Airfix Su-27 come together with its really cool Hydrographics camouflage pattern. I hope that you will join me, and out in model land, when you're doing your own projects, keep building them, build them well, and I'll see you again soon.